create lives of your own in a city that is having some real moments of its own right now. And so I just want to start by acknowledging that like we are meeting here during a weird time. And while the HLine was at the top of a lot of people's minds a few weeks ago, it may not be right now. And that's, I don't want the timing of this meeting to feel dismissive of other things that are happening in the Twin Cities. It is the nature of scheduling that this was on our calendar before we knew what the situation was going to do right now. And we are using the time that we have blocked for this. So I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here tonight. We are joined by several folks from Metro Transit tonight, including Kyle Burrows, who I will hand it over to momentarily. A couple of things before we get started. First, if you've been around D10 for many years, you may recognize meetings like this. Pre-COVID, we used to have like hyper-local topics meetings when they were warranted. We kind of got out of the habit of that during COVID. And so to some extent, like this is a great opportunity for us to reestablish that practice here in the neighborhood. So like you're here so that you can be heard. And if you want meetings like this, doing exactly what you've been doing, which is showing up and letting us know that this is a priority for you, helps the board know when it's time for us to call special attention and set aside special time for topics like this. Any of you who have been around D10 for a while, you have heard me talk many a time about the nature of our board. So we're a community nonprofit, but we're designated by the city of St. Paul as one of their district councils to help collect that hyper-local feedback and get out information in a much more like close to home way. The board is advisory, not compulsory, which means we can make recommendations when different areas of the city come and ask us for feedback. We can't make them do anything, right? As we find out frustratingly somewhat regularly. So tonight, we've got Met Council. Met Council has a presentation for us to hopefully preemptively answer some of the questions that have been floating around for the last few months. And then after that, we're just going to go to open Q&A. We're going to ask people to limit their talking time to 2 minutes. There's a lot of you. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to talk. We're also going to try to cycle through any new speaker before we go back to anyone who has spoken already. If you are somebody who's like, I actually do not want to talk out loud, thank you very much. I have good news for you. There are QR codes on the wall over here, on the wall up here. There's one in the doorway. If you scan that with your phone, it's going to go to a sheet that our D10 members, that's anyone in a green shirt tonight, is monitoring, and they will speak on your behalf. If you want to just talk out loud, you don't need to scan the QR code. The QR code is just if you are like, I have laryngitis, I'm keeping it to myself, you know, or just I don't feel like talking out loud.
Hey, guys, if you want me to bring this over to you right anytime, just write me down and I'll provide a copy of it.
We're going to try to make it as accessible as possible. As part of that accessibility, I'm not going to ask you to come anywhere to answer your questions. But what I will ask you to do is stand if you're comfortable standing, or at least wave your arms so we know where we're looking. And if you can, let us know your name and what your relationship to the neighborhood is, right, or to this issue is. That kind of helps all of us just center ourselves on what we're doing. For anyone standing, there remain seats scattered in amongst. Please feel free to sit down if you want. If you're like, nope, been doing enough sitting today, I shall stand. This is totally fine. Any questions about just sort of process or how we're going to organize this meeting before we get started? The last note that I'm going to make is just that, folks, we are all on the same team. All right, we are one big team here in Humboldt Park. Everybody wants what is best for the neighborhood, and we have different views on what that might be, but the goal is the same. And Metro Transit is also a member of our community, and they represent the wider Twin Cities as well. And so I want to make sure that they are here tonight as guests and not as punching bags for feelings we might have in our heart, and that we treat them with respect because we expect them to treat us and our concerns with respect as well. All right, with that, Kyle.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that direction. And I want to start by thanking you all as well for being here tonight and for Quebec for organizing the broader constituents of the board members for organizing and inviting us here. My name is Kyle Donald Burrows. I'm the planning manager for Ontario BRT, which we'll get into exactly what that is for folks who may not be familiar with Metro Transit, which is part of the Metropolitan Council. So our policy leaders are the Metropolitan Council members. And I think that'll be important for folks to mind here as well. And I do also want to kind of continue to acknowledge that, we are here in context of a number of concerns that have been coming to a variety of different sources throughout from the neighborhood here, from a number of different neighbors. One of our goals here tonight is to help kind of both address some of those concerns and really put those concerns in context, as well as be listening to this group. So we want to be hearing from you. We want to be making sure to try to ensure that those concerns are coming to the right place, which is Metro Transit and Metropolitan Council, which is ultimately responsible for delivering the HLine. And two, to let you know that, we had a couple of meetings, and topics about, what the FMV process will be like. And certainly I've had some, one-off conversations. This will be part of an ongoing conversation as well. So we don't view this as sort of the end of this conversation here tonight, both specifically with the Carmel Park neighborhood. And then also we have still ahead of us the first of several outreach engagement periods attached to HLine. That'll begin one way later in February. So wanted to kick that off here as well. What we'll talk about here, I have some materials to go through, and then, as mentioned, we'll kind of pick it up into sort of an open forum for community members. Before I get too far into the weeds, I do also want to introduce Sia Bell over there in the back, who's our outreach and engagement coordinator. She's taking notes right now for us, and I know others are taking notes here as well. We're going to be making sure to compile all of those and document those so that we have all of that. And I also want to introduce Jake Knight, who's the lead planner for the HLine, and has really been doing a lot of the planning work. And you've certainly seen him before with continuing decision. So those two are really going to be your primary points of contact on the HLine as we're going forward. I want to start us off by first doing a little bit of background on the HLine. I know many folks in this room are familiar with the HLine, but so that we're all starting from the same level set, doing some background on both the HLine as well as what arterial bus rapid transit is and what distinguishes it from the local bus route, the Route 3A, which comes through this neighborhood as well. Then we'll get into a little bit of the HLine details. And here too, I want to acknowledge that this has trickled out in a way that has created some concern, and just want to own that. That's not something that we typically like to have happen. We want to be sure to be kind of coming out with all the right information at the right time, so that folks are really getting that full picture. And just kind of owning that up front. But we will be sharing the details of the routing and some of the proposed station locations in this neighborhood. And those will be what are part of our more formal outreach engagement period coming up later in February. And then we'll talk some about the concerns that have been raised to date. These may not necessarily be the only concerns that have been raised, and certainly part of our conversation tonight. We can talk through some of those other concerns as well, but really trying to help put those into the broader context and kind of help give some answers to some of those concerns as best we can. We'll say too, one of our approaches here is not necessarily going to be giving a full complete answer to every question that arises tonight. We are certainly documenting all those questions and commit to ultimately providing answers to all those questions. But we want to kind of continue to be gathering information here and questions as well as we kind of bring back out to folks. And then finally, we'll talk through what our kind of next steps are in this overall process here as well before opening up for Q&A. So that's enough preamble. Getting into some of the HLine project background. So the Metro HLine is an arterial bus rapid transit route. What these really are upgrades to our higher ridership, local bus routes. Where we are trying to, make those upgrades in contexts that, that fit within the overall, the local context on, our arterial and neighborhood areas that these corridors run through. They provide, fast, frequent, all-day service, really trying to get some of those benefits of our kind of higher impact transit ways, with a lower footprint than that. And they really provide, stations and buses that are comfortable, easy to use, familiar. Folks can kind of just walk out to the station, catch the bus, and kind of go about their day without trying to really do a lot of in-depth planning when the trip might be like. So the H line specifically is a 17-mile line that connects downtown Minneapolis out to Sunray Transit Center, and is really providing a cross-town connection on our in our broader transit network along the Como and Maryland Avenue corridors, and of course through our neighborhood here in Como Park. It's based on the Route 3, and in particular the route through this neighborhood, the Route 3A alignment. And Route 3 is, one of our highest ridership bus routes in our region. Taking it over here today, you see that it's an important route for folks in this neighborhood, for U of M students, folks connecting further east in Como and Maryland, and it's an exciting part of what Metro Transit looks forward to in terms of delivering improved services over the next 5 to 10 years. It's one of 8 lines that we currently have planned through 2030. So we, of course, the A line, B line, C line, D line, and E line now, excitingly, are all in operation. We have the F line, G line, and H line currently in various stages of project development. So those will be opening over the next couple of years, along with the Metro H line planned to open prior to 2030. And so what we really see here is building out a network of these style of services, so folks can, not just connect to the particular corridor that they're using, but really connect into a broader network of fast, frequent transit ways that really get you to where you need to be without making, without requiring a lot of planning or in-depth into scheduling. So stepping a half step back, where did the H line come from? So the H line came out of the network next planning process that occurred through 2019 through 2021, which really identified those next 3 lines, those lines that are currently not operating right now. So the F line, G line, and H line. And we really took a pretty in-depth process, a 4-step process where we started with a wide set of candidate corridors, and ultimately through a series of evaluations and engagement steps, narrowed down to those next 3 corridors, which included the H line. So F line, for those who are not familiar, is operating on the Central Avenue University corridor in Northeast Minneapolis. The G line, a little bit closer to home here, is operating on will operate on Rice Street and Water Street. And the H line will actually connect both of those in downtown Minneapolis, and then intersecting with Rice Street in Maryland. So taking another half step back here in terms of how is arterial BRT different from the local bus service? There's really kind of 2 key motivators, 2 key distinctions that we want to really highlight. The first is a faster and more reliable ride. So one of our goals is to get 20 to 25% faster overall end-to-end travel time. That's not saying that the bus is going to be driving 20 to 25% faster. It's that your trip as a passenger should hopefully be 20 to 25% faster, typically through stopping less. There's a variety of tools that we use to accomplish that specific goal. And those are, again, really less about the bus going faster and more about the bus stopping less. There's a variety of ways. So first, we stop less, and we just have fewer stops. Arterial BRT stops about every half mile to every 3rd mile. And stopping the bus frequently. So I counted 39 stops on the 3 here from my office in downtown Minneapolis to right here. That's very frequent. That really slows the bus down quite a bit. So we try to look at those bus stops where they have the most impact in terms of like major destinations, where people are getting on and off the bus, transfer locations. Some other attributes about the stations themselves make the bus stop for less amount of time at those stations. So it's easier to get on and off the bus with slightly higher curbs, so folks can step down easier and don't have to use the ramp as often. Buses do still have ramps for folks who use wheel mobility devices. This is near level boarding. It's not like the light rail where it's flush. Folks pay their fares at the station, so before getting on the bus, they don't have to queue up at the front. Plus, because of that, people can get on at any door of the bus, either 2 or 3 doors. And then at signalized intersection, we use what's called transit signal priority. So that extends the green light a little bit or shortens the red light. It's not like an ambulance where the bus can just kind of fly through the intersection, changing the light, but it shortens or extends those lights, allowing the bus to just kind of get through, and otherwise it might be caught by red light. So in addition to that faster and more reliable trip, the other kind of key benefit, key goal of arterial BRT is really that improved experience at the station and on the bus. And of course, those of us who are riding the bus are pretty familiar with this scene, especially this time of year, where there's just piles of snow, or like sometimes, especially with the weather we've been having, it's frozen there, and that's just kind of stuck for the season. And we really try to avoid that in particular. And in addition, provide other passenger benefits that really improve the comfort and just sort of confidence in using the transit system at those stations. So there's a couple of different ways that we do that. This is a typical station, an image of a typical station. So for those of you who ride the HLine in the neighborhood out of Snelling, many of those stations, the stations are very similar here. This is a picture of a station on the C-line, which is on Penn Avenue in Minneapolis. But really the critical features here is every station has a shelter that has pedestrian scale lighting and heat. So folks can feel comfortable waiting in the dark, feel comfortable waiting in the cold, protected from the wind and rain. There's trash receptacles, so garbage doesn't accumulate sort of on the street. Real-time transit information, so folks can kind of see when their bus is coming. Bike racks, benches, these types of things that just kind of help folks feel more confident in using transit and help riders kind of have those benefits as well. And the other thing that we're really trying to do, and I spoke to this a little bit, but really this simplified network. So, we try to be very relatively simple. Every bus on a particular arterial BRT line does the same thing. It all goes to the same place. We don't have branches or short lines. They're trying to be simple routes, providing this, kind of linear connection. So it's just really easy to use and understand as a service. And we're kind of connecting to a wide range of destinations. Those include major ridership generators, high ridership bus stops, important destinations like regional parks, including Como Park here and Como Lake, and other kind of critical destinations like that. So sinking in a little bit into the details, we have, of course, an HLine routing, which folks are all aware of. We also have tonight to share kind of walk through proposed station locations, and I think the emphasis there is on proposed. We'll talk a little bit about this, but our kind of the thrust of our outreach and engagement efforts that are, both now, but also upcoming over the next 6 months, really will be about where HLine stations should be and how they should fit into the context of the neighborhoods that they'll be stopping in. So of course, folks are at this point familiar with the alignment, but just kind of highlighting where Como Park is kind of within the overall corridor. So from Snelling to Dale, approximately is kind of highlighted there. So basically right in the middle of the alignment. And so kind of connections both east and west from here, right along that kind of crosstown connection, will really add a lot of connectivity, transit connectivity to this neighborhood. Zooming in a little bit on that. So just kind of highlighting here the alignment through the neighborhood. and some of the key destinations that, we're really trying to serve and excited to serve with the Metro HLine. So, talking a little bit about Como Regional Park, obviously, this is a really important draw, really important connection for the HLine. Bringing folks to parks on transit is an important goal of the Metropolitan Council, and I know we've been working together with our city partners and others to help improve those connections as well. Como Park Senior High School obviously is another important destination through this area. The lake itself as sort of part of the broader regional park complex. And then, really kind of connections west and east of here, that cross-town connection. And so making sure that we are both providing that regional connectivity as well as the destinations, particularly through here. And then also just kind of highlighting the part of the neighborhood here that's kind of south of the railroad tracks and acknowledging that the street grid is, as folks know, they're pretty, there's very limited connectivity to that neighborhood through this area. And so that's something that we're thoughtful about too, when we're thinking about proposed station locations, is how do we best provide connections to the areas south of those tracks. As I mentioned, the focus of our outreach and engagement and our planning efforts right now is on proposed station locations. I did want to take a moment while we're talking about alignment right now to just kind of talk about some of the other alignments that we kind of saw coming through the comments that we received and some of those other proposed alignments, and talk a little bit about some of the drawbacks or challenges with some of those alignments here too, just so we're open and upfront with folks as we sort of see those things. So the first suggested routing that kind of came through some of the recent feedback we've been getting is really kind of shifting down to Energy Park Drive and front via Snelling and then kind of back up to Maryland on Dale. There's a couple of drawbacks to this one. I think a couple of the most critical ones are really highlighted here, but principally that avoids the Como Park and Como Lake area, as well as kind of moving away from Como Park Senior High School. So a lot of those really critical key destinations that is part of the motivation for the HLine and the benefit of the HLine are not served under this alignment. Additionally, those kind of folks who are kind of continuing to or through this area would experience some added time. It's about an additional mile kind of shifting down to Energy Park Drive via Snelling and Dale, a half mile in each direction, I should add. The other suggested routing that kind of came through is similar to that one, but instead of going down via Snelling, using Lexington instead. So the standard buses that we use on, our 40 and 60-foot buses, which would be used for TRVRT here, can't fit under the railroad bridge there on Lexington. So folks may be familiar with the 83, which uses that route, routing. That uses a special bus, a smaller bus, because it needs to fit underneath the railroad bridge. And so those style of buses are not the style of buses we use in our TRVRT. They wouldn't have the capacity to carry the passengers that they would need to carry on the HLine. So they wouldn't be able to keep that alignment. It additionally has the same drawbacks of not really serving the lake and missing some Como Parks as well. And then the other routing that was kind of suggested through recent feedback was this kind of idea of kind of coming through via Nagasaki. This is something that Metro Transit did look at internally on a preliminary basis, and it's not something that we're looking at right now. So folks are aware of that kind of through some of the conversations that have been happening. And really that key rationale there is, that area along Chatsworth and really kind of south of those railroad tracks can't be served using this routing. Additionally, I know this has been a topic of conversation in the neighborhood, and folks have really raised a lot of concern about operating on Nagasaki sort of through the park itself, between the Chatsworth Woods and the lake, and proximate to the lake, and that's been a concern that we've heard sort of tangentially as well through this work. So that's just kind of a quick hit on some of those routing, kind of ideas that we've heard on some of the, through some of this feedback. But do want to emphasize that our upcoming plan phase, the focus of that is really on proposed station locations. And how we do that is, the document itself is called the corridor plan. So, over the past, 12 to 16 months or so, Metro Transit has been working with our city and county partners to sort of get to this point. Well, we've been looking at a lot of different kind of ideas and locations for potential station locations and platform locations. And we're kind of coming out ready to get feedback on those. So these are proposed at the early phase of kind of first getting feedback on those. And that's kind of our focus. What we want to be doing in our kind of engagement phase coming up is really engaging potential station neighbors, engaging neighborhoods, and engaging riders on sort of how those recommendations might play out. Gather that input and feedback, and then make potential changes based on that feedback. And so really, again, in that corridor plan is, kind of station locations and the platform locations. The platform, think of that as like the bus stop. We are right now ahead of that planned engagement phase right now. So we're coming up on the first of 3 versions of our corridor plan, the draft corridor plan. Well, we're beginning our comment period on that at the end of February. It'll go through March. We'll then take feedback on that and propose a recommended corridor plan with potential changes based on that feedback before then hoping to finalize this corridor plan this fall, so fall 2026, and then entering in design and engineering construction later down, so in 28 29 beginning construction. And so these are those proposed station locations. There are 7 within the neighborhood from Snelling to Dale. So Como and Snelling is an important transfer location. Como and Hamlin also a transfer location, and serving the park. Como and Lexington serving the park as well, including our location here tonight. Como and Chatsworth serving the neighborhood kind of in and around the park and south of the park. Como and Nagasaki, again, kind of serving some of the senior apartment buildings there. Maryland and Grotto really focusing on our senior high school. That's where folks get on off the bus if they're high school students taking the bus. And then Maryland and Dale, an important kind of commercial node and transfer connection as well. So zooming in a little bit to those proposed station locations, specifically in the area, which I think has generated a lot of the most concerning info, kind of highlighting again some of those pieces here. So what we're looking at on this map are the dots where the proposed stations are located, are proposed to be located at the intersection. And then sort of these kind of walk roll areas, so kind of the within about a 5-minute distance from those station locations. And so kind of seeing where each station is kind of its primary service area and some of those key destinations that those stations are proposed to serve. And now I do want to get into some of the additional concerns that have been raised. And I think we're trying to collect those concerns, and unfortunately, that's part of our work here tonight is to kind of continue collecting those concerns. But really, so what we have, in our next couple of slides, some context that might help sort of broad, provide some context for some of those concerns. So really heard, things around, kind of the number of buses that are expected to kind of come through this area relative to traffic through this area. Concerns about safety, both with respect to the high volumes of pedestrians coming through here, proximity to the Twin Cities German Emergency School, and safety of the students, sort of the narrower street and kind of park interaction with parked cars, and then kind of how the stations look and interact with the neighborhood itself, and sort of how they interact with the park and process the entire. So these next slides are really just sort of some kind of helpful context information that might help just kind of address some of those concerns. So in terms of the number of buses per hour, so folks are familiar, Route 3A operates through here. So it runs about 2 to 3 trips per hour. per direction through the neighborhood here on Como. The proposed HLine would go up to about 4 to 6 trips per hour per direction. So certainly more trips, and part of that is, the frequency improvement there is improving the usability and of the service itself. Situating those additional trips kind of within the broader context of the average daily traffic from all vehicles through here. On Como Avenue west of Lexington, we're looking at about 6,500 vehicles today. East of Chatsworth, we're looking at 1,900 vehicles per day. And then Como south of Maryland, we're looking at about 5,500 vehicles per day. And these are the most recent traffic figures available to us and to the city of St. Paul. Another concern is about the size of the buses. So certainly understanding that concern there. The Route 3 today primarily uses the same size buses that the HLine proposed to use, so those 60-foot articulated buses that we see. Some trips, the bus I took over here was a 40-foot bus on the Route 3 today. So both are used throughout, but articulated 60-foot buses are used principally today. And those, operate through the neighborhood, safely. They operate through the neighborhood, with. We'll take the. They manage turning templates kind of through the neighborhood. And those same style of buses here will be used today, used in the future on the HLine. One other thing that has kind of come up is transit service near schools. Certainly that's something that Metro Transit takes really seriously as well. And we do just kind of want to provide a broader context. Arterial BOT and other high frequency bus routes. So buses that come as often as every 10 minutes throughout most of the day do operate safely on streets adjacent to schools today. Here are just some examples, but in particular calling out two that stand out as operating with buses directly adjacent to car drop off and pickup, so parent pickup and drop off, student pickup and drop off by car. So that's something that, again, we do have experience dealing with. Our operators are trained to deal with that and navigate through those situations safely. And it's something certainly our street operations folks are always paying attention to as well. See these things. So the broader context here too of kind of operating through areas that are relatively constrained or with high numbers of parked cars, high numbers of pedestrians and cyclists. This is something that Metro Transit does on a regular basis in a number of contexts. So every transit rider is a pedestrian, and transit does, it sort of has its highest ridership in areas that are also the most pedestrian friendly and the highest pedestrian activity. Our operators are trained to be looking for pedestrians, are trained to be looking for cyclists, and are trained to navigate through, narrow streets with parked cars. This data is from the city of St. Paul, and within the city of St. Paul, transit buses are among the least likely to be part of a crash by a vehicle type within the region. And again, our operators do receive extensive training with emphasis on safety and safe operations. We also operate in a number of different contexts near parks and green spaces. In fact, one of our goals is to try to provide better connections to parks and green spaces, particularly regional parks like Como Park. This is again just a couple of examples of how these stations and buses kind of fit in those contexts. So this is a picture of HLine near Richfield Road in Nebraska. And here is on the B line in St. Paul, John Ireland and Marshall near the broad capital town that complex. And then two, we kind of try to fit within the broader neighborhood context that we're in. So we have a number of different sizes of stations, ranging from very large stations in a high ridership context two pretty small stations like you see here in a more kind of significant residential context. So this is an example in St. Paul on Snell and Hamlin on the D-line. Stations and how they interact with the passes adjacent. An example from Fort and Fairview on A-line. And here's a recently constructed station on Sheridan 39 from the E-line in South Minneapolis. So we work really closely, to kind of fit within that broader context, and then as we get from planning to design, can also work with station neighbors on sort of where, how to fit the specific amenities within that broader platform footprint. Next, I want to quickly talk about next steps. So again, you've seen this slide, this outreach and engagement period is ahead of us. But zooming in on that, just kind of provide a little bit more detail. We have really kind of two major public comment areas. So coming up here later this February through April is on the first version of this plan, the draft forward plan. We'll be making revisions to that draft forward plan based on input, some of which we'll receive from our neighbors here and throughout along the entire corridor. Then come back to release a recommended corridor plan later this summer in July. Have a second round of outreach and engagement, the second comment period, before then submitting the final corridor plan for approval to the Metropolitan Council for their consideration for approval in the fall of this year. And of course, in addition to those formal public comment periods, we'll be kind of continuing to have direct engagement with the Como Park neighborhood and other neighborhoods and district councils throughout St. Paul, and of course throughout Minneapolis here as well. This is just kind of documenting some of the ways that we're going to be engaging. I think, our goal is to try to make sure that every station neighbor or potential station neighbor knows about this project and has an opportunity to sort of understand the project and weigh in on it thoroughly. So we need to provide a tactics to do that, and hopefully continuing to put into the parking to help with that as well. And I'll pause there, and that's a lot of information, and I want to thank you again for patient listening and we'll get much for the question.
Right, thank you, Kyle. And for anyone who didn't have a chance to grab when you came in, Metro Transit came with high quality printed copies and enough of them, which I deeply appreciate. So if you didn't get one on your way in and you want one, please feel free to grab one on the way out there if you want to have your notes with you. From here, we're going to move into open questions and discussion. Kyle's got some other folks from Metro Transit here who may or may not want to call on to help answer questions here. We'd like to keep this part audible for everyone, which means that one person talks at a time and that we are trying to be somewhat quiet so that we can all hear each other. It's sort of an echo space, so it gets a little tough if there's a lot of chatter. The other thing to just note is that Chevik is recording this meeting. It's not live streamed or anything like that. Nobody's joining by Zoom. This is largely for note taking and for folks who might want to reference it going forward. So part of why we're going to ask you to talk one at a time and talk clearly is so we can capture your questions and we're able to keep track of that going forward. Right. Like I said before, if you're able to stand in your seat so we can see where you are, that's great. If not, just raise or wave your hand so we know where you are. Please let us know your name and again your connection to the neighborhood or this issue, so that we can have that for context. And with that, I will open the floor. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jace. I live down at the Kendrick Apartments, right down there on the Energy Park. I've just a couple clarifying questions. The slide that you showed the frequency, like per hour trips. Sorry, this might be kind of a dumb question, but does that directly translate to like how many buses one stop along the line sees per hour?
That's exactly
right. That kind of, okay, cool, perfect. I think it's a great improvement. And then my other question is about the existing 3 lines, specifically the 3A, with the hyperlocal stops more frequent. Would those be going away and basically be replaced with the H line, or would the 3A line still operate along the same route and hit all of its hyperlocal stops?
That's correct. So the 3A will be replaced by the HLine, so where we're having stations at, every half mile to every third of a mile.
Sure.
Really trying to make sure that we are kind of maximizing the number of people who are at or within, a one block, a short block of those stations. But then the stops that are sort of in between, the Route 3A stops that are in between, those would not have Route 3 service on them.
Okay.
And the Route 3B would have, would continue to operate in some fashion.
Okay, and maybe the 3U as well, which I don't know much about that line, but.
Yeah, 3U would be replaced, but that's part of that.
It's kind of the same. Okay.
Short of the loop, yeah.
Cool. Are we allowed to give comments or is this just questions?
You got 2 minutes.
Oh, good, cool. So I take the 3B route and sometimes the 3A, depending on timing. To and from work in downtown Minneapolis, 2 to 3 times a week, and I have for a couple of years, and I hope to continue that for many more years to come. One of my main experiences, maybe not negative, but like just one of my experiences on the 3B or just any of the 3 routes is when they go through campus. During school year, they just get completely flooded with students, which is so awesome to see. And it especially gives me a great opportunity to keep on top of the fashion trends as I age.
We see that.
But anyways, I think that having the increased frequency, especially through that part of the route, would probably help to, like, I've seen situations where there's so many kids trying to get on the bus that the bus driver literally has to say, no, you cannot get on this bus. I'm sure that makes kids late to class and everything, and I'm just a huge proponent of transit. I love rapid transit especially. I think it's great, and yes, I guess that's about it. Thank you.
That's you.
Hello, I'm Sunil. I actually had been later in the other tunnel, but I do take the 3 pretty much daily to commute to the St. Paul campus, and I run through my partner visual often and yada yada. My first question was somewhat unrelated to the bus specifically, but in my promo, we recently had a presentation on the Como Avenue Southeast Corridor Improvement Project, where they're looking at putting in separated bike lanes along Como Avenue Southeast, because currently there's 10 bike lanes that are kind of soggy, basically like bike better, and they're basically unusable during the winter. And I was wondering if there was any corridor improvement projects that weren't related to the bus that relate, especially between, I know the border with St. Paul and Cleveland Bremen, and there's just like jumping bike lanes and they start off with the chips, but after that, it's really annoying, so like navigate that, especially in the winter. Were there any things going for that?
There are, so we are coordinating with City of Minneapolis to this specific point from that you were referencing on that project and the HLine. And David is actually right behind you, David Peterson, at the City of St. Paul, and he can speak to some of that as well. There's also plans that the city has some reference to.
So just to reiterate the question, so you were asking would the separated bikeway be expanded in St. Paul, is that the question? Okay. So for context here, that segment of Como Avenue was fairly recently rebuilt. Reconstructed, I believe, in 2018 or so, which is like, we don't build things as fast in St. Paul, that's kind of brand spanking new in St. Paul. And it has a lot of things like curb extensions that make it a little difficult to do kind of an interim treatment, which is what we kind of see in Minneapolis and places where it may be close. It is on the city's bike plan for separated bikeway, and the logical connection would be, the same side of the street where the trail ends at Randy to Como. At this time, we did have a conversation with the city of Minneapolis about this, about possible extension. We don't have a project, we don't have funds available to do that kind of work. It's what the fire reconstruction on one side of the street. And we have a lot of other things. So, unfortunately, the short answer is no, we don't have an intention right now to extend that. It is the long-term plan that there be a separated bikeway on that whole segment of Como. The discussion now with Minneapolis is where does the transition happen for their separated bikeway to move back to the directional bike lanes on the street, which is what's there now. So we're looking at possibly doing that kind of near the actual border, or possibly that when the student has a training with them.
And then I did have one other, guys question comment.
We're gonna pause and check our time manager, or, no, okay. We don't count people's answers against you folks, right? That's fairness too, so go ahead.
Okay, so this is, I guess, more about or Park rather specifically. So as, again, as a pedestrian that goes through the area, I feel like Home Avenue, at least especially between like Hamlin and Lexington, which is through a park, has a lot of cars speeding. And I was wondering if they're going to be like, traffic calming efforts through this project. No.
Yeah, it's again, something that, so part of our, in general. Part of what we do with our stations is often, kind of bump them out, usually try to narrowing the kind of intersection. So that can be sort of part of the traffic calming aspect, but through that part specifically. There's not something planned as part of the HLine. The HLine really is not is a kind of a stations project, so there's a series of, of stations being built at intersections. We're not doing we're not doing any machinery or road on and off lane in the parts between the HLine stations.
Thank you, that's pretty much it.
And so I just hear a comment that came out of that, that we acknowledge that there's some busy traffic that goes through that area. And so as part of, assessing maybe any early traffic issues, looking at that. Go ahead.
Mine is more of a comment that might kind of relate into the question, but I wanted to kind of speak to that area, and I'm looking at a map, it looks like, oh, that makes sense, it's fairly direct. I live on Chatsworth, and I can kind of describe in that area that part that goes around the south part of the lake, we're talking about Como, the tower.
15.
Yes, yeah,
15.
yeah, Como, Chatsworth, it's like, to describe that area, that half-mile stretch, it's made up of 76, all of the things on that road, it's 76% single family homes, about 18% duplexes, 5% triplexes. This is a low density residential area. There are no businesses on this portion of the route, there's no community services on this portion of the route. And furthermore, that area was identified in 2015 for David Peterson, that's fairly new for us, for traffic calming engineering improvements. That road was rebuilt. The road is narrowed, bump outs put on the intersections. Traffic calming is meant to reduce vehicle volumes and speed. So we're talking about a BRT line on a road that's literally designed to reduce and restrict traffic. Those improvements did help our community. It helped our neighborhood. We've got Chatsworth Woods there. We've got the school there. We've got that long stretch of Chatsworth that runs and brings you right into the school zone. We've got Fans Lake, the German immersion school. It's crossing that Fans Lake multiple times a day to use the park for recess. It makes sense for us to have traffic calming in that area. It doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense for a BRT line. Currently, two buses going in opposite directions on Chatsworth can't pass each other at the same time without one bus stopping right the other window. Buses making that turn from Como to Chatsworth have to pull way into the oncoming lane just to be able to make that turn and navigate around the bump outs. Living on Chatsworth, we have seen multiple instances of legally parked cars getting hit by buses. I don't think any of us are blaming the bus drivers, but the last one, the bus.
3 weeks ago?
Yeah, 3 weeks, just last month, he said, I didn't even see it there. I'm blaming the bus drivers, we're blaming the fact that there's a bus in that route at Holland, that is not meant for it. And a few blocks away, we do have areas of much higher need, we don't have high ridership, people are not getting off in this area very much.
We're at time.
Yeah, all right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
My brother, green spectrum. Yeah.
Kyle, I was actually gonna ask you if you could go to slide 15, because what I wanted to talk about first is, pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry, en route. I live in the neighborhood. Thank you, Brian. Anyway. If you go out to your website, it talks about the stated goals, for rapid bus transit. You already talked about one of them. And providing faster, more reliable, more attractive buses at 25% faster, not faster by speed, but just by destination, you get that. Then the other goal was promoting transit oriented development. which is that corridor is intended to concentrate development near high frequency transit, supporting economic growth and more sustainable land use. Okay. The next one I think is really interesting is increased transit mode share. Okay, that's how do we increase bus ridership, correct? Okay, and the city in this part, the city of Minneapolis, in partnership with Met Council, have been working towards establishing increasing ridership up to 25% in 5 years. And it was, I think, 10% in 2010 or 13%. The problem I have, or the concern that I have, I shouldn't say the problem, is the 3A bus and the 3B bus run together. They are part of Route 3, which is the 5th busiest route you stated. Once they get to Como, or I'm sorry, to Snelling, B goes over to Energy Park, A continues down. Now, if you look at Como and the corner there, Como Avenue and Snelling, right on the very east corner of that, there's probably a handful of businesses. Nelson's Cheese, J.L. Thompson, there's a Mexican restaurant, all would benefit from the BRT. Okay. But not necessarily the 3A. Okay, they could benefit from the 3B if that was that, and that's what I would propose. The idea then is once they go down Como Avenue through the park, okay, continue all the way through off of across Lexington and they go on Advanced Lake. And they continue down around the lake. There's almost 2 miles from that point down to Dale and Maryland, where the next business is, which is Connie's Creamy Cone. Okay, we're looking for, and if you go over to Energy Park, Energy Park, over there you have businesses galore. Okay, and a need for traffic. When you look at Metropolitan State University, Great River Charter School, HLine Health, one of the largest data processing centers in the state is right over there as well, US Bank. There are just an enormous number of riders and I think opportunity to build that ridership on roads that are really designed for that kind of volume, that kind of traffic frequency. And I just think I really think that makes, if you explore that, I think it makes a lot more sense. I think it feels much more logical. Keep the 3A going through, you still get access to the park, but it's not bringing in rapid transit buses that were not designed for park roads. They just clearly weren't engineered for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a second, because now you guys are gonna get me saying, watch out for your 2 minutes. And thank you for that. I think the thing I'm gonna tell you guys to do, I know that you are responsible adults and you can plan your time. What we don't want is to cut off your good points. Right, like you have good points, you have things to say, and so ahead of time, think about how you can say that in a way that makes sure that everybody else also gets to talk. And so what I'm gonna ask is that Shevik is gonna give you like a 10-second flasher. And then we're gonna start.
Stand over here.
We're gonna start to do that thing where we like move towards you. I don't have a foot, but it can start to become physically imposing. So I'm gonna ask you guys to please try to stick with those 2 minutes and you get to try it first.
I'm a very passive person, so don't make me get it.
All right, my name's Donovan Hanu. I also live near the intersection of Como and Chatsworth. I'm a civil engineer. I have one concern and it's very specific. The vehicles don't fit there. They narrowed the street and an articulated bus cannot meet a car, much less another bus. I looked at the entire H-line route. That is the narrowest point with the sharpest turn on the entire route. So the idea doubling the buses per hour doesn't sound like much. Well, 4 to 6, built 2 to 3 times. It's gonna have a huge impact on that spot because if buses can't meet, cars can't meet, and I know what's gonna happen next. And my concern is the city is gonna come and say, we can't park on the street. And say, we got small garages and they're gonna say our little area can't park on the street. I am extremely concerned that it's gonna be the only way to make this bus line fit through that corner. And I can't believe, I understand planning and architect making this decision. I can't believe civil engineers said this is a smart idea. So I'm worried that, have you reviewed the accident data? You talked about safety. I mean, just 3 weeks ago, we saw a car got hit. We've seen other cars get hit right there. We had a vehicle get hit and run by a big white vehicle, but I don't know what it was, but it was tall and white. And it's all happening in a one block. It is the pinch point of the entire H line. Driver training isn't gonna fix that. The vehicles don't fit. And it's funny, you came from Minneapolis, just ride a little bit further and watch what happens. Everything kind of comes to a halt. That's my safety
There you go.
concern.
That was a sticking to your 2 minutes. Go ahead. Yeah, right here. Me? Oh, no, keep it short, eliminate unnecessary stuff. Okay, I'm going down here. So I'm asking, if you're open to listening and meeting with us and having a compromise. The size group of neighbors and interested citizens have formed this ad hoc committee to review the current HLine plan. You see a lot of them here. And we've really come up with some good ideas. I would ask that you put a temporary hold on implementing this any further until you've met with our committee or the interested people for specific ideas. When you say that the route down front making the H line go where the current 3B line goes, I think that's a big mistake. You haven't actually considered that there's 151 person apartment high rise that depends on trade. There's businesses, there's the apartment building the young man lives in, there's medical facilities, there is a new shelter for unhoused families going in. There is opportunity because Energy Park was built for business to increase the attractiveness of small businesses in that area. And then to make everyone else feel okay, perhaps we can keep the 3A line. So people can get downtown, their work at the state, which we know everybody's gotta go back to work now if their buildings down there. So if we keep the 3A line, but just make it the same frequency and smaller buses. Because then they would go through, I don't think that the ridership on the buses. From the Capitol building to 3A, I mean, to, the end of 3A, which I think would be Eustis and Como, would be, affected, so thank you, I'm asking for compromising meetings. And talk to people who live in Carolina Park for over that for decades for everybody else. Thanks.
Alright. I agree with everything everyone said. I live on Como and Chapters, so I literally face the plan. I watch that pedestal by MD every day. My concern circles back again to the safety. When I moved in 6 years ago, one of the first things that I did was tack up, please slow down signs on the poles outside of the Como Park area. Because the speed of traffic on that little stretch is never what it should be. So that's number one. Number two, I'm still concerned about the effect on the actual road itself. Because it sounds like it wasn't designed for this type of traffic. And also the environmental effect to the park. So I think most of the people here today aren't so concerned. We're more concerned about that stretch than we are the bus station. That it seems wants to be a topic of conversation, and I know that needs to happen eventually, but it's really that stretch that we're concerned with. Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
I'm John Vogel. I have lived in the park for about 35 years. I share a lot of the same concerns that other people have already mentioned, but particularly, I guess, one of my experiences living where we do is, Como is the most heavily used park in the Twin Cities. And one thing that's unique about it is it has, a zoo, a conservatory, a lot of different attractions. So people typically come not just for a few hours, but for a day, a half day. And there's sort of a constant, mix of people looking for parking, unloading families, small kids, pets, picnic, paraphernalia. So there is a lot of somewhat unique traffic congestion issues along the Como corridor. As I looked at the project website, it struck me that, the goal seems to be, a once in a generation investment in an arterial bus line with new station infrastructure. And I wonder if, we're on the verge of one of the most significant redevelopment, opportunities in the Twin Cities when the University of Minnesota Golf Course is redeveloped, which is, as I understand it, 15% bigger than the Highland Bridge development in Highland Park. Whether, that should be factored into where the optimal corridor is stored, just given what the usage patterns will be when that development occurs. And then the last thing is just sort of a small point, but my wife and I walk our dog every day, and as part of our habit, we pick up trash in the park. There really should be trash receptacles at the stations.
Just convert there.
No, at least at the spots.
Not the bus stop, yeah.
You say they're wheelchairs.
Alright, up here and then we'll go back there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chad. I live just south of the lake, so I'm really excited about this PRT, I want to say. And I also want to say thank you for coming and meeting with the entire community here, so that we can all have our voices heard. I really appreciate that. I want to ask if there's any analysis on how many vehicle miles traveled that this would reduce. Because we're hearing a lot of concerns about the speed of traffic, which is a lot about cars, accidents on the streets, which is a lot about cars, congestion issues, which is a lot about cars. And these are all issues that I think can be fixed with BRT. And I want to know if there's any analysis on how many car miles are going to be reduced.
Yeah, so we do traffic analysis and ridership analysis on that, and kind of in general, and kind of get to like, here's approximately, what the VMT, so vehicle miles travel reduction is. But we don't say specifically, HLine will reduce VMT by X number. But that is an important goal of our BRT program. And increasing ridership on transit is a critical way that you can pull out travels that have reduced in our region. On other corridors that we've opened, we've seen ridership in those areas, grow from the existing local service anywhere from, like 25 to 30% to on the D-line, getting back to pre-COVID levels. So we're very significant increase. So that is, really, partially contributing to mode shift. Particularly in a major regional destination like a regional park. Folks, when things become more convenient, easier to use for a wider swath of people. That is a major contributor to vehicle miles reduction, where like I would take my car to the park, now I'm actually.
Thank you. Alright, blue shirt, back to it.
I'm Shelley. My husband and I live over at the corner of Como and Chester, and we've been there for 37 years. We've had 2 vehicles struck right up in front of our house, parked right there. We've had to fix our road twice at like $5,000 to $6,000 a piece because of the heaviness of the buses and the frequency of the 3A, which we appreciate the 3A, but it's just, our road's not made for that. We've had someone run and come around the corner and run in the middle of the summer, run right in the front of our house, which is very close to the corner. The houses over there are very close to the road.
Was that a car?
There was a car, it was a car. And one of my neighbors also had on the other side on Chancellor, so we both had houses run into and cars sit on the road. And buses have hit cars on the road as a part of that. It's a tight little spot. It's a quiet when the traffic's not there, but it's a very tight little spot. And if it's the spot where the actual stops go to, I mean. I can't imagine that it won't have to be changed if it's done, honestly.
Yeah.
And there's only a few driveways, but they're in there, so what happens to that? You know, we can't park on the road, we won't have our driveways anymore. We don't have garages, it's just kind of funky over there. I really, someone said they really love the notion of keep our 3A. Use the business, the heavily populated business route where there's a lot of ridership too. Hardly, our buses are usually empty. Very few people come out and get on them there, so. I think there's work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have you and then. Yeah.
My name is Merrick Reed, I live on Chatsworth. First off, let me just ask, who's happy with this plan? Who's unhappy with this plan? So it's called the arterial bus GRT. These are not arterial streets. In the city of St. Paul 2040 plan, they do lay out arterial streets. The front is one of them. Como, Chatsworth, Van Slyke is not. A map from the District 10 Council itself does the same thing. This pocket isn't included in arterial roads. To echo what Donovan said, they're just not big enough. Also in the 2040 plan, the city of St. Paul identifies nodes. And in those nodes, promote amenities that support those who live and work in neighborhood nodes, including frequent transit service, and leverage the use of public transportation. That route is missing two important nodes, one on Dale in front and the other on Lexington in front. So it's missing a lot there. In addition, the city of St. Paul 2040 plan has identified significant views. One of those views is located, I think the dot is actually on my house. Looking over Chatsworth Woods into the lake. It's talked about the view over Nagasaki into the lake. The entire route of Como, Chatsworth, Van Slyke has that view. I can't imagine that the BRT would support that view. So the question is, why would you put the bus through an area that is already problematic instead of routing it through an area that can actually benefit from the BRT?
Yeah, sure, yeah, so I mean, like we talked about, I think one of the critical motivators for the alignment that we've got here is access to the regional park, access to Como Lake, access to the parks in the high school, and access to, this neighborhood, right? So, providing through transit service in a variety of contexts is an important goal of arterial BRT. I've heard, not every. And I think too, just have to think that we have a sort of a network, right, of both local and arterial BRT buses. So, not every node is served by any single corridor. I think that's an important part of this piece too, when we're talking about some of these other opportunities. Those are important parts of our transit network. Those are important areas to serve as well. But that's the kind of access to these critical destinations, regional park. Obviously, there's tension between providing access to a major regional destination like a park, and also transit also provides access to kind of commercial nodes, either small neighborhood commercial nodes, larger commercial nodes. Those things are in tension, right? We want to be doing both of those things. Not at the same station locations, obviously, we don't want to have a major commercial node in the middle of the park. But the park is important for all as well as other commercial nodes too. And so, broadly, that's kind of.
Okay, Reg.
Hello, I'm Brian Tempest, 1231 Como Boulevard West. I've had the pleasure of serving on the ad hoc committee for Como Park with Warren Swenson back in the nineties, where we studied Como Park for travel, traffic, safety, and who's using it, like people who stay here all day rather than tomorrow. Worked with Robert Piram and a young man named Mike Hom. Anyway, our family are avid bus riders. And so I think the perspective that we bring to the table, well, is where I live. And that's on Nagasaki and West Como Boulevard. When we moved into our house, we found cars coming into our yard on a bi-monthly basis, about 10 cars a year. So you think you have one car, you're not doing so bad. We've had dozens and dozens of cars. The point being is safety. You take a look at the people who are here, kids, elderly, a cross section, intergenerational people. You walk around the lake, you hear 10 different languages. A lot of people have never been here before, pets, buses, strollers, you name it. So this idea of putting the buses in the right place, but also serving the places that need to be served, I think is the key to this thing. Some people have already mentioned that if we go with a rapid transit over where it should go on the streets that are prepared and ready for that. And then have complementary smaller buses going through the areas that want to be served, that want to bring people into the park, that want to get onto these sort of smaller streets, safer, smaller buses. That seems to make the most sense to me, that combination, and it's done now. You're talking about linkage, right? North, south, east, west linkage, these main roads. Well, let's utilize some of the minor vehicles for the minor roads. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. And sort of serving the areas, but also having safety.
Well, just a quick reminder that if you are somebody who doesn't want to raise your hand and talk out loud, you have the option of scanning our QR codes. Or next for right up to you. Okay, yes, and so we're gonna take just a pause to read the ones that the comments that are coming.
The two that came through were a question about why the eastern terminus of the route is Sunray Center and not downtown St. Paul. And the second one is the section of the park between, I think that's, I should look at it here, Lexington and, or Hamlet and Lexington. That area where it goes through Como Park, the road is also quite narrow through there. There's a lot of street parking through there. There's a lot of people driving very slowly in the summertime to try to get in a prime spot in the park right there. And so I think there's some concern that that section of the HLine that's currently aligned there is defeated by the already hard vehicle traffic of the park. That the speed with which the buses can get through that section of the park is inhibited by the nature of the avenue right there by Midway. That sort of thing. So those are the questions, but
Let's go Sunray first.
Yeah, so Sunray versus downtown St. Paul. So really, that is a better. So that's a change from the existing alignment today, or the period obviously doesn't St. Paul there. What we are, actually, let me just do our network slide there. That's kind of. So HLine does not operate on its own. It's part of the broader context, right? And so really, what we're doing here is providing. We've heard from for a long time, a strong desire for more cross-town style services, in particular, kind of connecting and not having everything go into downtown. And really, particularly Como and Maryland Avenue through here is really good, good opportunity to have sort of explore, but really is not kind of a service today that continues through on Maryland Avenue. So folks east and west of kind of 35 and Rice Street don't have that kind of connection. You have to go downtown and then go back out, which are kind of continuing on Maryland Avenue. So HLine would enable that connection. And then transferring is an important part of the help, so connecting from one bus line to another. What we can do when we have the station structure that we do with our BRT and the frequency that we have with our BRT is make those transfer connections really convenient and comfortable for passengers. So folks who would be, kind of continuing on there and going into downtown, have an easy way, kind of step off the HLine, connect the G line. It's right at the same intersection there at Maryland and Rice, and have a short wait for the next bus. to kind of connect and downtown St. Paul, so we're able to provide that crosstown connection while maintaining those connections into downtown St. Paul, and, you know, north on Rice and kind of south through downtown and onto Robert Street as well. So, and then connections to Sunray, you know, there's connection to the HLine, which is really a good, again, extender of our network out in the Woodbury, other locations. Connections to the upcoming Bonds line, former Purple, familiar with. And then Sunrise itself, the transit center, so there's a lot of local bus routes too that are not shown on this map that kind of connect in there. So it's really kind of about increasing that network connectivity and sort of access for folks to get to your destinations. And then it's, yeah,
Does the 3B continue to service St. Paul, downtown St. Paul from this area?
right now, concept routing would be, yeah, that 70 to 3 to be on front with that can continue down Maryland into downtown St. Paul. And then, sorry, could you remind me of this?
Yeah, it was about the section between Hamlin and Lexington and the park where
Yes.
the road narrows. and
Yeah, so,
full
you know,
traffic and-
yeah, it was, the fact is that there are, that, you know, we are in, all of our roadways, buses operate most of the time in a shared context with the cars. A lot of times in kind of busy destination with a lot of cars, and we do, have to kind of navigate through it. And so certainly there are busy sections on the HLine where buses will have to be navigating in and around cars like 150 days. And that, you know, it would be great if we had like totally dedicated guideways for the buses in every context. But, you know, we don't have that.
Okay, I'm gonna, all right, I got 4 of you now, so I'm gonna work my way from the back here to the front, so we're gonna go Terry, black sweatshirt. Another black. Another black shirt. Ah, yeah, okay,
It's Terry Wagner, home park there for about 40 years now. There's one of the graphic about the talking points in my. The talking point home park senior high did not serve the alternative proposed line. Kids within a mile, maybe even 2 miles are walkers. If you've ever been there at 3 o'clock, all those kids from the high school, have you seen County Spring, the line goes for them. So they can walk that extra block. That would be required for that alternative. I wanna just like state my point that also like back up all the other businesses and we say, oh, Park Senior not being served as a school. But then if we don't on Energy Park, we're not pointing out that they're not being served. If they don't have a line, in addition to the businesses. The second point that I'm wondering is if at what capacity Public Works and Parks had feedback into this, because if you've been to Como in summer, we all know, because we're the ones cleaning up the garbage, the park is at capacity almost every day. So do we have the infrastructure even in the park if you want to increase ridership to like welcome people? Obviously, we want people to enjoy the park because it is a gem, but how much can the park increase in capacity load? And what is Parks and Rec gonna do about that? Then my other point would be that, you pointed out that the high frequency route, I don't know the terminology, sorry, is 75% faster. So to me, that indicates the extra 1 mile, the alternative that's been proposed, would add to it. If you cut the 3A that's been proposed, if there is ADA mandates, if that's even a thing anymore, that would then cover the people at the high school that would need both services, so thank you.
Just to, sorry, to answer your question, we work very closely with both Public Works, the city of St. Paul and Parks, city of St. Paul, and have developed these instead of kind of collecting it.
Hi, Christopher Watson, I live a little further south on Snelling. I had my first part I just wanted to see to you, I have a question about. If you could explain, I use almost 4 times a week, I only drive once a day because as everyone should mention, cars are the biggest problem. We see it all the time with how fast people drive through our neighborhoods. This is a St. Paul problem, this isn't just a Como problem, it's everywhere problem. And so anything like this, where it aims to get less cars on the street, I'm always gonna be a big fan of. The B-line, if you could talk about how, I know you've seen, or Metro Transit has seen like a big change in ridership since it switched from the 21 to the B. I want to give you a little time on that, because maybe that could help explain why this is such a big change from the 3.
Yeah. So we have, in fact, as I mentioned earlier, seen pretty significant increase in ridership from the 21 to the B line, which for folks who aren't familiar, runs through Selby and Marshall and
Can you step a little?
yeah, sorry. The B line runs on Selby Avenue in Marshall in the city of St. Paul and connects over the river up the Lake Street in Minneapolis. I don't have the percentage figures right now with my hands, but it's been a pretty significant increase. So, you know, historically, on other lines that we've seen, you know, anywhere from 30 to 50% ridership increases depending on which of the particular lines that we're talking about. So it's a really big impact, and we've seen, you know, some ridership change on the B line as well. You know.
So just to piggyback on that, I think, so for instance, in like we talk about the suburbs and how crazy it is in Como, I'm currently someone where because of the headways, so they're not headways, but the wait time between the switch from the A line to the 3 can really vary, especially with the lack of frequency on the 3.
Yeah.
So I'll be driving because it just cuts so much time off that, where a project like this like gives me the ability to actually take the bus instead of drive, which, you know, opens up more space throughout this neighborhood and brings less cars in this neighborhood. You can say that, you know, you feel concerned about buses and how they take up space here, but drivers, I promise you, as someone who takes transit every day, I am a million times more scared of someone in a car or a truck than I am of a bus.
You're here.
And so I would appreciate this project to be able to do that using my car less, and a lot of people also being able to use the car less.
Hi, my name is Jake Cooper. I live at 811 Como, which is right next to this Como Nagasaki stop. Kind of want to reiterate some of what you said, and also, first I want to say I appreciate the investment in transit in the neighborhood. And I appreciate you guys being here today. You know, I'm not gonna say that I'm an expert in Como and Chatsworth section here, but what I will say in terms of like some of the concerns that I think people are talking about with like over congestion around Como Park Conservatory and stuff, I see this as like a part of the solution to that. I mean, me personally, first of all, I've spent $1,500 on a car repair, and so maybe I'm a little annoyed with my own car usage at this moment, but like me personally, I'm a lot more likely to be using this HLine than the existing lines. A lot of that comes down to the frequency of the usage. The 3 is inconsistent, and there's a long distance, and I am like kind of guy who forgets my keys when I'm, you know, running out of the thing, and so I can miss it by 2 minutes, and now you're sitting around for 35 minutes waiting for the next thing if you're lucky. You know, I also want to say there's a lot I like about this routing. Maybe selfishly because it runs right next to me. I won't lie. But I think it's really important that things like the school and the park, both parks get served directly. You know, I've seen a lot of data about you know, improved safety, the better economics in terms of like serving schools directly with actual city transit instead of making everything be the yellow bus or you know, making parents drive over there, the congestion that causes. I really appreciate this plan, and I thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Bobby Joe, and I live with him by the pinch point. And I have 2 questions. One is, have they talked to the bus drivers that drive through that pinch point? And what do they say?
So we do talk to our operators internal and our food supervisors, and we, you know, we recognize it is a pinch point, right? I don't wanna, deny that, but with, you know, basically they're trying to operate safely through there. I think too, just to kind of highlight, you know, it's a pinch point right now. Folks do have to kind of take the turn slowly. And they do that, so they work through that intersection, and then if they appropriate funds through there.
I have a second part of that. As this year alone, I have witnessed 4 bus cars getting hit by buses in front of my house. They were not ours because we have learned to not park exactly. But next door to me is an Airbnb, and I have seen some of their reviews, and they are complaining, and I would be pissed. If I was traveling, all of these people, and they have all been smashed. And I'm still hung up on that. I'm curious if there's a monetary number that Metro Transit has for one area where there is consistent crashes caused by buses hitting legally parked cars. What is the discussion around that? And what do they do? And how, I mean, that costs a lot of money. That's 4 vehicles that were most likely totaled.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer of like a monetary policy or something like that around that. We do track that, and it's tracked through the city of St. Paul as well, and so it depends on enforcement from both the folks who own the vehicles and from the operators. But we've seen in 2025, we had 1 reported instance of a vehicle, a bus sideswiping a vehicle. And in the past 10 years, I think it's something like 3 buses involved crashes compared to, in the 40s when it hit
I need you to speak up.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Between cars and cars, there's about something like 40 to 45 documented.
Between cars
three
and cars?
Yes.
I'm not worried about cars and cars.
I wanna help.
I'm home all day and I watch it.
Yeah, it's I think just to provide the context, there's been.
Well, I recognize this. I'm a former insurance adjuster.
Right.
But the frequency in that one pinch point, and also I want to reiterate, I don't want to lose my parking. Because we don't have an alley spot to park. And we have a single car driveway, so that parking spot is important.
We have to back into that pinch point. We're the only driveway right
I
there.
got some other folks who are waiting here who have not spoken with this place.
Hi, I'm Deb Lonsley, and I'm a resident here, for everyone who's living here. I want to build here higher field. Your higher angels. To listen to those of us that live in this area, who know and watch what goes on. We took a show of hands the first time that the Metro MTC was here online. In terms of how many people were involved with or had any kind of communication about the planning process for the route, the HLine. And not one single person raised their hand. And it was a crowd pretty close to the size. None of us heard a thing about this. So it's really important that you hear us, because that part was skipped over the first time. And I think it's premature that your planning stops when the route is wrong.
Other folks who would like to talk that have not yet had a.
Hi, Suzanne Reese, I live up on Hoyt Avenue, which has a ton of traffic, and believe me, if there were BRC on Hoyt, I would be happy about that, and I'm a strong, bike and transit advocate, but I see you all are very organized, and you have a very organized opposition, so I'm not sure that anything I say I don't think anything I say will change anyone's mind. But I do want to say that the concept, some of what I've heard tonight just discourages me, because I hear people saying, buses will be detrimental to the views of the park. How can a bus be detrimental to the views of the park? I hear people say the park is at capacity. What does that even mean? Do we not want to support modes of travel that will potentially reduce some of this car traffic that people seem to regard as a kind of inevitability. So that's my main point. Then I guess to follow up with a question. I mean, I do support this route. I take the bus to downtown sometimes. I'm always on the brink of missing the 3. It's always right ahead. If I want to put my bike on the bus, but in terms of this pinch point that people are talking about, are there going to be some further engineering studies to look at those turning radii and see if there are any solutions that can be found? Because I see that's a real concern.
Yeah, great question. And so we have done preliminary concept development for this that has included turning rate analysis of the turning radius. We also have ahead of us, following the planning phase, a design and engineering phase that really kind of gets further into all of that as well. But we answer those questions in the planning phase with preliminary concept designs that are developed by civil engineers that we look at and make sure that the bus can move through the intersection safely.
So that is still to come.
Right, that's part of some of the work that we have done to inform our work right now, and then we'll continue to have them too throughout the rest of this process.
All right, I've got one right here, and then you do that.
Susan Janda, resident at 1189 Churchill Street for 30 years. My question is then, do you plan to widen the road? What that was recommended to be narrowed for safety as it goes around Van Slyke?
No, that wasn't.
Okay, so it occurs, and it seems to me that somebody in their wisdom of city planning said that would be a good idea to use traffic calming because this neighborhood needs it. So there is a pinch point. When I first moved here, I was really thrilled to live in front of have a house that has a bus in front of it. I still am. And I was also really excited about the strip of businesses on front, and I couldn't wait for them to be found and developed because I love to walk to a neighborhood business. That never happened in 30 years. And when I heard my neighbors talking about, well, what if we could they didn't listen to it, they didn't ask us anything first, but we have so many great ideas. Is there really any way that we could use the bus to help to rent it, get some interest in that area? That's really interesting to me. Do you have any, on another topic, do you have any data about how the bus's timing will be affected when it hits the congestion that really happens on this stretch here of Como? So for example, we're worried about sometimes emergency vehicles can't get through, or people are waiting for the next parking spot and it's double parked on sometimes in 3 ways and there's really only 1 lane of traffic. Do you have any data about that?
And to clarify, the portion of Como through the park.
Yeah, so because you're talking about rapid, buses where you're trying to get best, better times and that kind of stuff, and suddenly they're going to go through a part of the city that has a lot of traffic at different times.
Yeah, so we have completed traffic analysis as part of our planning work here. We do look at kind of where the existing slow areas are today on the Route 3. And there are going to be areas that can move faster and move slower on the HLine as well. And going through Como Park in sort of the peak times when folks are kind of moving slowly through there to try to park is a time where the bus will, no matter what it looks like.
Lugubrious.
Yeah.
Okay. And then is there any data about when that bridge needs to be replaced on Lexington?
On the railroad bridge?
Yeah, you're like, it's too small for the buses if you consider that as an alternative. So, yeah, it's too small for, I know, it's a sort of neighborhood joke, but is there any data about, at some point that's gonna be oh, we need to fix that. Is that part of the?
So I forgot to introduce myself, I'm David with the Public Works Department and Transportation Planning. I'm not a civil engineer working on that type of a project, this Lexington County Road. The bridge is owned by the railroad. And if anybody's ever worked with railroads, they will never replace the bridge for all time. They don't have to. And that's probably also a historically significant bridge, I guess. So the likelihood, if it's in sound, of getting replaced is very low. There's not a lot of ways that we can compel the railway to take work on it. We actually have a bridge, further to the east. And there, which is kind of a problematic bridge of that street. And it's in good condition, even though it's almost 100 years old, unfortunately. That's a problem with those types of things.
And so then I have two more things. Mar mentioned this thing about, there are a lot of good ideas from people who've lived here for a long time. I think it would be really nice if you'd be willing to open that discussion just to see if maybe something else could shift, because the only thing that I see is that the park, which is a huge hitter and wanting to be like reached by this special line, is one thing compared to a variety, he was talking to, so a variety of other things that could be, you know, all the businesses up Dale, all those businesses across front, and then down to that corner by the state fairgrounds. If you take that little extra jog, could be really worth it if you find a way to get into the park as well, because I do think the park should be serviced. And it's not hard for the high school students to walk from the corner of Dale.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, my name is Patty Road and I've lived here for about 35 years. We've residents, volunteers and stewards of the park. We also pick up trash and walk out. I have a lot of different thoughts, but one of my questions was if you, Kyle, or is it Jake, it'd be interesting to know whether you've ever been through that area of Hamlin and Lexington during the busiest parts of the year, because as a planner and Lilita, whatever, it's just overwhelming. But I also wanted to speak to someone that feels sad about what she's heard tonight. I don't think there's anyone in this room that is against buses. We all love public transit, so just as public transit is a public good, so are public parks. And so we love and protect this park, and so we're thinking about what is appropriate, and I think about a long-term planning of Como Regional Park long-term plan, 2024. In that plan, they're looking to have traffic reduced, so doesn't feel like a good fit for rapid transit to come into. And how does that work? Have you worked with the Como Park people in terms of how this impacts that plan and what their goals are? I know you have goals, but the goals, and I appreciate that, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right things to do. And I appreciate what you're saying. Yes, we have the regular buses coming in, so we're still gonna be bringing people to the to the park. But why not then better serve and develop Energy Park in front? So have the resources, spend the money where we need it in the right places.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a few minutes left here. I wanna just put a note out that we have a lot of Metro Transit employees here right now. So if we want to prioritize questions for them that they could respond to in real time, this is probably the right time to do this. We want them to be able to receive feedback and comments. But when we talk about just the timely nature of that, if there are questions right now, let's prioritize those.
What would prevent you from doing a split? So that some of the H runs all the way over to the shopping center, but other times it's running into downtown.
Yeah, so to answer that question, one of the core goals of RTD, right, is simplicity, ease of use, easy to understand. So we avoid really, as a matter of policy, short line program shows on Ontario BRT. Every bus on the HLine or on any of our other lines that is going in direction goes to the same place. And that's on purpose, because a lot of the barriers that people experience on getting on and off the bus is confusion and not knowing where the bus goes and having a hard time just kind of understanding that. The other thing too is what that does is splits the frequency, as you're obviously, that's part of the point. You know, for some folks who want fewer buses, that's a pro. For folks who are trying to sort of use the bus and have a consistent and reliable and high frequency experience, that's obviously a disconnect. And so we would then everybody along Maryland Avenue. In this particular case, would have their frequency cut in half. So St. Paul would have, that part of St. Paul in particular, would have, for half as good a transit as the portion for the west, so that's good. Is a short answer question.
Has Metro Transit had, I'm just a point of curiosity. Have they gone to the conservatory and the zoo and the swimming pool and the carousel, all the parks, on a very busy day, and asked parents that are there with all their small children whether or not they would be willing to take a bus to there instead of driving? And I think most people that drive is because they've got little kids and taking small children on the bus is I'm just bad. But I don't know if anybody's asked those questions, done a survey directed towards families.
I'm a parent, I have a young child, I take the bus, it's very easy to walk on the bus with the child. Easier than getting in and out of the car seat. I'm having my second one in mail, that should help.
I'm just wondering, but what I want to know, if anybody, if they got any type of
So just
specific survey.
yeah, so to answer your question, specific to surveying parents using using the park, we have not done that survey. We do survey riders on their use. I would say as a matter of personal, I have 3 kids. We take the bus to the park, this park. It's fun ride, so that's me. I'm a non-representative sample. But you know, someone else asked me that question earlier. Yes, I personally have been there in both a work and non-work capacity. I've seen and experienced that. And
Just a quick question for Kyle.
Yep, yep.
Just first, thank you for being here. Really do appreciate that. I know it's not easy. Slide 16, would you just explain again? It sounded to me like the only downside to going to Energy Park was the added time distance, which I kind of question because almost 25 miles an hour, that's 35 miles an hour. So there's there's that, but is there anything else in there that you see as being a reason for not?
yeah, I think the critical piece is not serving the destinations. So Como Park, Como Lake.
But if the 3A continues, I'm saying 3B became that rapid transit. Then you're also picking up all the extra opportunity for businesses that are on Energy Park, and it's just a huge business corridor. And that's not served.
Yeah.
With the high transit, with the rapid transit right line.
It's not that Como Lake and Como Park are not serviced today. They are. Correct.
Yeah.
You can take the bus, you get to the lake and the conservatory and the zoo and the park. Correct. So it's already being serviced. I want to mention that along with the school, there's the Known Festival, there's the State Fair. We haven't had a real snow day here in Minnesota in a very long time. And it's going to be a challenge. And I feel it's gonna be one that you regret down the road and will probably be an expense that could have been taken another way. Thank you.
Yeah, so BRT runs every 10 minutes versus a normal bus route every half hour, right?
20 minutes. So that depends on the normal work bus route. Yeah, every 10 to 15 minutes for BRT. A wide range for local buses. In this particular context, it's 20 to 30 minutes on the route through it.
Right, and it's, for me, sometimes I take the 3B to work, sometimes that's 35 minutes, often. And so if you're asking somebody to take BRT part of the way and then transfer to get to the park with your 5 kids that people take, because I see them on the bus, you're potentially waiting for half an hour for the next regular route bus service to come by to pick you up, to bring you to the last part of the day. Right, potentially?
Sure, yes, I mean, it's hard to, yes, I think, one of the, I think maybe trying to highlight, one of the important parts of frequency is the reduced wait time. Both when you're making transfers and when you go to the bus.
Isn't there a transfer from there?
I just wanted to say.
Well, I spent the first 4 years of my life on the East Coast with mass transit. And I didn't learn to drive until I moved here. And it seems that a lot of what I'm hearing from people who are taking the bus, and don't take this the wrong way, is not missing the bus and waiting for the next bus. I had to walk 6 blocks from the train station, and there were 3 trains for the hour. So that's every 20 minutes. If I miss that train, tough luck. Tough luck. I'm basically waiting for the next train. Maybe I'm late going into the city. But, you know, it's, if that's the complaint, if that's why you're putting more buses on a line, is to reduce wait time. That seems a bit absurd. It's just part of, you know, walking from Como to Front, which was a complaint 25 years ago, when the buses were put on, was an issue. It's like, it's 5 blocks. I mean, I don't understand, you know, I'm retired and I can still do that, okay? So I don't understand. That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're asking me, why would we want to reduce walk distances for people who are using the bus and wait times for people who are using the bus? Yeah, I think broadly, it's just we are in the business of trying to improve the transit experience. But you're eliminating stops too, that's what you're saying. Yeah, so there's less space. That's right. So people can be walking further. So there's kind of a contradiction in your theory. Well,
I'm gonna interrupt us because we are not trying to play like catch the transit officers in some way or not. I mean, like the point is taken, all of these are trade-offs, right? Like these are all trade-offs, and I think it is reasonable for folks to want to know what the trade-offs are when there's a change this big coming to the neighborhood. And I just want to make sure it's not directed at him.
I walk my dog along Como Avenue because I live between Como Place and Chatsworth, not Como. And I'm up at 5:30. I'm walking at 10 o'clock at night. I see a lot of empty buses. And they're the long ones as well. The drivers are walking in these buses.
You don't think they were more full if the frequency were better?
Okay.
Sounds like everybody's getting a little hungry.
Yeah, so folks, I've got 2 more people who have had their hands up. I'm gonna let them talk. We are to that point where everyone's looking at the clock and it starts to get a little wily. So I'm gonna ask us all to just like do one more deep breath and hang and know that at the end, we will let everybody go. And if you wanna hang around for a couple more minutes and help us throw away chairs and talk to us, you are very, very welcome to do that. But I've got 2 patient waiters here, right here.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say, kind of, is this. To share the sentiment, being a little disappointed, people are very quick to say, oh, high schoolers who a lot of them don't have cars, oh, they can just walk another block, they, you know, can move. But they're so scared of like parking spot being somewhere particularly perfect when people that are driving can also walk another block instead of, like, I just feel like that's a much more vulnerable population than the people driving around in the city, and that's something that is, you can turn instead of making high schoolers and younger people who are far more vulnerable to people driving around at high speeds in this neighborhood. People who are driving or parking somewhere that are a much smaller group. Like that's one thing I really care about. And yeah, frequencies, if I'm transferring to a bus, because a lot of routes are multiple routes, I'm less likely to take the bus for that route if I know I might have to wait 20 minutes for it. I'll just drive instead. And so now we have another car instead of not another.
Thank you. We don't, you know what, we're just.
I think you have a lot of data that shows that amount, like frequency of bus running through does really impact ridership. So I just don't think it's really debatable that like the amount of it will improve the amount of ridership if we see more buses. I will also like just like a weird personal story. I had a friend who had like type 3 diabetes, which is a rare form of diabetes, very extreme. We were leaving Como Conservatory after a day of visiting there. They you know, it's hard to exactly plan when you're leaving. They were running low on sugar. We go and we wait for the bus, and like the bus, one round didn't come, and so we had gotten there supposedly just after one lap, so we waited around for like a half hour, and that one didn't come. We waited around for another half hour to finally come. At this point, my friend who has type 2 diabetes totally ran out of sugar, ended up passing out before the bus got there. I had to get the ambulance to come and get them. So like the frequency and usage of these places, especially in places that are like amenities that should be available to everybody, I think everybody should be able to use the park, are really, really important. I guess I did have one question, which is like to clarify some of the getting to downtown issue. I realize it adds a transfer point, but I'm assuming that the idea here is if you want to go to downtown using the H rapid, you will eventually be able to get on the G line that goes down to downtown. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the
Thank
G line will be prior to the H line, so that will be available for folks who want to.
That's exciting. Thank you.
So, all right, with this, I'm gonna close this for comments and questions, but you are invited to hang out if you want to try to catch someone specific. Everyone here bit their tongue at a point when they wanted to say something, so it's just like, good job, all of you. Yes, right? Like, it's not fun, but it's a hard thing for us to come to these meetings like this. It's vulnerable too because it's your neighbors. And our first and primary goal is that we are all able to say good things to each other. You all came here because you love the park, because you care about your neighborhoods, because you care about safety and accessibility. So the common ground is a lot.
I have to ask, will you commit to meeting with a group of neighbors, the small? We call ourselves an ad hoc committee, there's kind of a 4 groups of people. Will you commit to meeting with us once or twice to go over with what our ideas are, what we can do? And to see if there is a happy medium that we can come up with. I need to know if you will do that.
We will absolutely, but this group again, with as a smaller subgroup, that's absolutely something we can do.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'll also just add that, I think it's really important that we continue to have this conversation. This community's been having this conversation for many weeks, for a few weeks now. This is not the first meeting. This is also not the last meeting. There is going to be ongoing engagement points throughout this process that Metro Transit will continue to come back to us to create more opportunity for us to share more and increase perspectives and change perspective and all that. So I hope that you will continue to pay attention to Chevik's weekly newsletter on Fridays for when more engagement opportunities are coming out. Folks who've been engaged with the process know that Chevik's been very involved, very communicative, very open with the process. So please continue to reach out to us and we can continue to follow your feedback to various points of contact within Metro Transit, within other areas of the city and all those sorts of things. So continue to see D10 as a resource. We have a community event coming up on February 7th where we expect some community engagement to be around the HLine and engagement period then too. So please hopefully, stay in touch with us and thank you for being here.
If you did not sign in when you came in, please do, that's on the front table there, there's all extra copies of the presentation if you'd like to take that with you. I'm gonna roll out our share holders if you feel like helping other share away. Thank you all.
I just also want to offer my thanks for you all. I know this is, we took out 2 hours on your weekday night and there's a lot on, so I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, guys. All right.